They are legally binding assurances that essentially the state will not be in control of the club. And the sequelae of that is, if we find evidence to the contrary, we can remove the consortium as owners of the club in accordance with the rules.
So that was Richard Masters, the Chief Executive Officer of the Premier League, back in November 21, when he was interviewed and kind of asked to justify the decision of the Premier League to allow the takeover of Newcastle United by Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund, the PIF. So there's been some developments over the past day or two which could put Newcastle United in a whole boatload of trouble. In this video I'm going to try and kind of sum it up in an understandable way. It's news that's kind of hot off of the press at the moment. First of all, apologies for the lower production value of this particular video. I'm sat in my kitchen, you might hear the occasional dog bark, so apologies for that, and I will from time to time read some notes from my computer about these unfolding events, but this isn't a good situation. So just a quick reminder of the background and the context to all this, and how it's come to what's happening over the past 24 hours. Is back in October 21, when the Premier League allowed the takeover of the PIF of Newcastle United, or an 80% stakehold. It did come with some legally binding assurances that the Saudi state would have no working involvement or ownership over Newcastle United, despite the PIF being overseen by the Saudi government, the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. So that was the understanding, and that's why the Premier League allowed it to go ahead, despite remonstrations by some other Premier League clubs, human rights groups like Amnesty International. So the Premier League and the Chief Executive come under a huge amount of scrutiny because of the controversy of this particular takeover. So there you go. It had to be on the understanding that a private individual would be the chairman of Newcastle United, representing the PIF, and the Saudi state would have no direct involvement. So what exactly has happened to bring all of this into question? Well, actually it involves golf. Now, I'm not going to pretend to know a great deal about golf. I know next to nothing, but it involves a dispute between PGA Golf Tour and LIV Golf, which is either owned or heavily funded by the Saudi Arabian PIF. Now, the details of the dispute between PGA Tour and LIV Golf aren't really important, but this resulted in Wednesday whereby a judge from a Californian court ordered the head of the Saudi Arabian Sovereign Wealth Fund, Yasir Al-Rumayyan, to appear in court as part of a lawsuit brought by the PGA Tour against its Saudi bank-ruled rival LIV Golf. So Yasir, because he's heavily involved with LIV Golf, he's been summoned to court by a Californian judge as part of that dispute, whereby they also want to see various documents held by the PIF. Now, I might be wrong with the exact timescale of this, but I think he's got 21 days to respond. Now, lawyers acting on behalf of the PIF have filed in response to this what you call an amicus brief, and I'll read what that brief states. Is that the order is an extraordinary infringement on the sovereignty of a foreign state that is far from justified here. The Public Investment Fund and His Excellency, Yasir Al-Rumayyan, are not ordinary parties subject to basic discovery relevance standards. They are a sovereign instrumentality of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and a sitting minister of the Saudi government. Ouch. They're basically claiming that because he's a sitting minister, he has sovereign immunity from attending a court in California, and for the PIF to refuse to submit documentation which basically gives them the opportunity to look through their books. So basically, having a Saudi government minister also being the chairman of Newcastle United is in direct violation of the law and the agreement that was made with the Premier League back in October in 2021 when they did their owners and directors test. Also, very importantly, it should be noted, having this legal departure between the Saudi state, the Saudi government, Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and Newcastle United. This separation meant Newcastle United, the club, were in effect, as much as possible, separated from human rights abuses at the hands of the Saudi government, but also the murder and mutilation of the Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi, where he was mutilated in Turkey. The situation's obviously added fuel to the fire, especially from other Premier League clubs who saw the takeover as being questionable and even unlawful. But also Peter Frankenthal, the Amnesty International Economic Affairs Director, has jumped on this, as you can imagine, and has said it was always stretching credulity to breaking point to imagine that the Saudi state wasn't directing the buyout of Newcastle United with the ultimate aim of using the club as a component in its wider sports washing efforts. And he does go on to say that the Premier League will surely need to re-examine the assurances made about the non-involvement of the Saudi authorities in the Newcastle deal, not least as there's still a Qatari bid for Manchester United currently on the table. Now let's set aside first of all our loyalties and passion for the owners of Newcastle United. That's not under question. We'll have to look at this situation through the legality of what's going on, because this not only is this putting a beady eye on Saudi Arabia and the PIF, and in particular Yasir Al-Rumayyan, it puts the spotlight also squarely on the integrity of Amanda Staveley and her company, and Jamie Rubin in his company, because clearly they're all locked into the same consortium. And going back to what Richard Master said back in November, the Premier League do have the power to remove the consortium ownership of Newcastle United. Guys, I can't understate this enough. Newcastle United are in a whole boatload of trouble over this, and I really don't know where it's going to go. Of course, the lawyers representing the PIF across in California could rescind that statement, claiming that Yasir Al-Rumayyan is a government minister. That would mean that he's then compelled to attend court, and for the judge over there to have access to the books of the PIF to go through their financial records. That's going to be serious for Saudi Arabia, because it's not the most transparent sovereign wealth fund in the world. If they dig their heels in and they don't rescind that, which is what I expect to happen, then it clearly turns the focus of attention back on Newcastle United and the owners' directors' fitness test. Of course, like I said, the Premier League have the power to ultimately remove the consortium ownership from Newcastle United. Worst case scenario, but I suppose if it's found to be that we're guilty, the club's guilty of this breach of the rules, it could mean Yasir being removed as chairman of Newcastle United. It could also mean some sort of penalties towards the club in terms of points deduction. I don't know. But what I intend to do is keep right on top of this particular story, because it isn't good. I'm going to understand a bit more about what's going on and try and keep you updated. So there you go. That's the situation we find ourselves in.